Hello everyone. Um, so I've been playing this game, Witchfire, which is currently in early access on Epic Game Store. And after leveling up the weapons to the third Mysterium, as well as most of the spells and the relics, fetishes, the items, um, I came across something that is one of the first coherent builds or archetypes, I would say. I like to call it a fire cricket because it relies primarily on a fully upgraded cricket and the fireball spells. It's a very fast moving, in your face, high APM sort of play style. You can almost think of it as the complete opposite of a sniper build where you sort of hang back and shoot people from afar. Here you'll be dashing in and out of the middle of the group, doing tons of damage with your two primary tools, the first of which is, like I said, the fully upgraded cricket. Now, when I first started playing this game, I thought the cricket was a piece of shit. It did very little damage, it had piss poor range, and I had to constantly reload because of the small clip size. I also didn't think much of the first Mysterium. I thought it was merely an experience gain accelerant. But it turns out gaining extra volatile Witchfire actually boosts your spell recharge, um, which, needless to say, is going to go a long way helping you spam more fireballs, which are already very spammable with a fairly fast recharge rate and the ability to hold or start off with multiple charges. Furthermore, when you get your cricket to the second Mysterium, you're able to instantly reload your firearm simply by dashing after a kill. Again, this is super useful because when you're in the midst of a group, like I said, you have to really get up close and personal with this weapon. You don't want to get caught reloading. So it sort of frees up your APM to be more brazen. It allows you to cast, dash, move, shoot instead of having to wait for the reload animation. And again, it's very dangerous to get caught reloading um, in the middle of the group. It's not the same as with a sniper rifle or even like an assault rifle where you have a relative safe distance from the group. Lastly, the third Mysterium is also very powerful because every time you do score a kill, the dash not only instantly reloads the firearm, but also gives you a damage boost which stacks several times. The second major tool here in our arsenal is the All-Seeing Eye, and it is important to have this on hand because it has a massive damage boost to full HP enemies, which allows you to soften up your targets and then finish them off with the cricket, therefore conserving your ammo because you don't get a lot of ammo for the cricket, and it is very valuable. And it's also nice to have a secondary element in Decay to go along with your fire damage. The fire damage will be coming from, like we said, from, well, the cricket, because two of the relics, the Painted Tooth and the Crown of Fire, give you fire damage. We'll talk about that later. And you have the Fireball spell, of course. The heavy spell is the Rotten Fiend, which I find is very useful, especially with this playstyle, to have your enemies taunted by a second target, which is what you get with the third Mysterium. It says right there, all enemies focus entirely on the Grenadier. Like I said, being in the middle of the group means you can very easily get focus fired. So this can often get you out of a bind. Um, Now, looking over at the relics, we have the Painted Tooth and the Crown of Fire, and they both fulfill a similar function in that they give you elemental fire damage or apply burn to target. You just have to satisfy different conditions for each. One requires headshots, the other one just requires dashing. And here we see the fetish of our choice. It's the henbane, and honestly, I think everybody in the community at this point knows that henbane is busted. It makes your healing pots basically overpowered, and paradoxically, the lower your healing stat, the longer the immunity period with the henbane because you have a slower recharge health recharge time, which allow basically extends your immunity period and those additional bonuses to your combat stats, to stamina, to spell recharge. You really don't get that in any of the other fetishes. The Bittersweet Nightshade is something that I've yet to play around with. I have a feeling that it might fit into some other archetype that relies on keeping yourself, in a sort of hurt 50% HP state to do damage with the shockwave, but I don't know. I haven't tested that enough. So, we're gonna run down over here to the shrine and have a quick peek at our stats. When I started, I actually leveled vitality and endurance exclusively because I was only going to use weapons. I thought you could get away with that. Turns out you're seriously gimping yourself by by not using spells. So you see, vitality, endurance. I pumped them to sort of a soft cap. Same with witchery. At this point, I'm only getting 1% spell recharge per level. And I just started pumping metanoia because, quite frankly, I didn't know what else to do. Healing, like I said, is not only useless but counterproductive with Henbane. Luck could be useful, but at this point I'm so powerful that I'm not really worried about avoiding calamities and such. Anyway, we're going to make our way down to the portal and jump into the first area to show off what damage we can do with this build. Okay, so here we are in the first area. I like to get an overview of where the main groups of enemies are, as well as, very importantly, the ammo locations, because as I said, the main shortcoming of the cricket is just low overall ammo capacity, so I'd like to sort of plan my encounters and my routes as efficiently as possible. There's quite a bit of traveling around empty spaces in this game, and I try to minimize that as much as possible. So I try to figure out in my head ahead of time, see where I'm gonna go, which groups I'm gonna fight, when I'm gonna restock, and so on. And you really don't want to pick up those ammo boxes early because they pretty much fully recharge both of your main weapons. So you want to try to spend all of your ammo or as much of it before. Here you see me challenging what was supposed to be a small or low threat group of enemies, but turns out to be a special event called an ambush. So I'm actually a bit lucky here because 2 of the 3 alarm bells spawned right in front of me, so I could quickly dispatch them, but you see me kind of getting a little bit confused here and trying to find the last one, the third one. You can see it on the minimap. It's a sort of darker red triangle, just hiding behind this bush here. A bit annoying. Take a little damage in the process of trying to find it. And here I pop that Henbane empowered healing salve, and you see how it brought me back up to full from, I don't know, maybe 40%. If I didn't have Henbane, I would have probably needed two of those salves, if not 3, to get back to full with my current healing stat. So not sure if you're noticing how this works, but basically, like I said, I approached the group with a bit of all-seeing eye, soften up the targets. Once I feel confident that I can kill an enemy within 1 clip of the cricket, then I start dashing in and chaining kills together. And remember, as I'm doing that, the cricket gets more and more powerful. So ideally, you want to start off with the lower HP, weaker enemies, the light enemies, let's call them, and then build up your cricket so that you can more efficiently dispatch the chunkier enemies. Something that I recently discovered and I wanted to talk about here actually is the use of feathers. You saw me picking up 2 of them earlier from a locked chest, and I only recently found out their full uses. I thought they could only be used for re-rolling certain arcana. It turns out you can use them for 2 additional purposes. One of them is to unveil the 3rd arcana block in a row, because whenever you pick up a crystallized chunk of Witchfire, you only get 2 of them, then you have to select one. but you can spend 2 feathers to unveil a third option. You can spend 1 feather to re-roll one of the 2 options, and you can spend, I believe, 3 feathers to select either the other of the 2 options that you naturally got, or the third option that you unveiled with 1 feather. So, in theory, if you have enough feathers, you can fill out your entire Arcana board. So the whole 3 columns times 9 rows or whatever it is possible. And I'm told online that the key to it is basically farming calamities, purposefully triggering them, not fighting the twister so much, but actually allowing the calamity to trigger, winning at whatever event, whether it's killing 10, 16 wretches or swordsmen. Doing that seems to reward you with a decent amount of feathers. I haven't tried it myself, but I can see how that could work if the player is skillful enough and they have a particularly good run or setup. And you see us here doing the dashing in and out, throwing out fireballs as much as possible. I could be spamming them more, looking back at my footage here. I could be spamming them more, and sort of there's a lot of downtime that I'm not, taking full advantage of. So I basically, even now I see I have 1 charge of fireball there. Finally, I used it, and it's already back. So I'm definitely not using the fireball to its fullest potential here. So I could be even more aggressive than this, is what I'm trying to say. And you hear every time I get a kill with the cricket, I do a quick dash, and that is followed by a brief sort of sound, which shows you that the cricket has instantly reloaded and gained a damage boost. And like I said, that damage boost stacks multiple times. I don't know what the limit is, but something to keep in mind. Here we get sort of a crappy pick, not very enthusiastic about either of these 2 options, so I just decide to skip them in the hopes that later I can re-roll once more with a feather. Looking back, probably the stamina would have been fine. It's just not exciting. Well, I summon the Grenadier. I get a lucky hit on the soul of that swordsman, which staggers them and opens them up for additional bonus damage. Something that I probably forgot to mention, perhaps you guys already know, is that targets on fire take additional damage from other sources, so that's another key point of this archetype or loadout or build. So whenever picking Arcana, you want to keep an eye out for anything that relates to fire damage and spell damage. So my game crashed. I had to restart the run, which we did here. I had a semi-buggy treacherous wisp event, the one where it refuses to move and it just keeps spawning enemies, and I thought it would basically never end and it would have to restart this run as well, but it did eventually dissipate, so we're moving on. Anyway, just a quick note, this is in the 24 hours that I've played this game so far in early access. This is actually the first time it crashed on me, and I'm just suspecting it has to do, or it had something to do with the recording software that I was using, NVIDIA Shadowplay, if anyone's curious. I'm told it's not the best, but it is convenient since I already have it. Anyway, so we're moving on here. We're challenging a group of swordsmen, which I would like to classify as medium targets. You can't exactly dispatch them with one cricket clip, so they do require a bit of either softening up or building up the damage bonus for the cricket. When dealing with groups of mediums or anything non-light that has medium targets, heavy targets like the grenadiers, the handgunners, and those big square shield guys that I forget the name of, you can't really afford to start chaining kills because there isn't a single target that you can kill outright in one clip. So it's better to just sort of try to dance around the edges, use the minimap to your advantage to figure out how the enemies are spawning and how they're positioned relative to you. Try to eat around the edges and move move inside, tag everybody with fireballs, stay on the move, apply fire damage by dashing around with your cricket, tag everyone with a bit of cricket spray, and then once every target in the group has been sort of softened up a bit, then you can start going in for the sort of the picking off the weakest links, so to speak, and chaining kills together, and again moving from light to medium to heavy targets. Ideally, all things being equal, is what you'd like to do with this particular loadout. Quick note on those shield-bearing blight swordsmen, or whatever they're called. I find it you can shoot out their projectile, and I'm pretty sure it does damage to enemies if they get caught in the explosion radius. So that's something I like to do with the all-seeing eye before approaching them for an up-close kill. You can also toss a fireball, which seems to stagger them, or at the very least do damage that bypasses the shield. So the splash damage seems to bypass the shield, which is useful. Something to keep in mind in general and for this build. The AI is pretty clever, something that I do appreciate. I love the way the assassin enemies, for example, toss out that small pyramid flashbang grenade, and how they use it to basically flush you out of cover. I love the options you have for dealing with it. You can basically look away at the moment of detonation, make sure it's behind you, or shoot it out of the air, you know. It just makes the combat feel a lot more dynamic, and one of the things that I feel this game does really well is it makes you respect the enemy lineup and their capabilities. It's not really no single enemy here is really cannon fodder, and I've seen some people online complaining about perhaps how the game isn't, you know, as fast flowing as they hoped, but I think a lot of that has to do with them not respecting what the enemies are capable of and not playing smart, to put it bluntly. So we get another choice of 2 Arcana. Since we don't have any ice spells, I decide to just go for Witchfire Orbs, which is not a bad bonus of additional Witchfire. We're going to make our way down here, find some more swordsmen. And again, looking back at my play here, I feel like I'm not using my fireballs nearly enough. I'm just not keeping an eye on that counter, which is something I could improve on. And I think I was relying or trying a little too hard to just show off how you can chain kills together with the cricket, because the first time I discovered this, I was just having a blast. I think I was at a lower level at the time, and I was fighting weaker, lighter enemies, so I could really just go to town. And here we pick up one of the best Arcana for this build, I think. Both of those are actually fantastic, double Light Spell and Cascade, but I decided to go for Cascade first, and hoping to unlock double Light Spell later with a Feather. Cascade, in case you missed it, basically gives you critical hits after each spell cast, and since you have a high rate of fire with the cricket, and a very spammable fireball spell, you can see how the synergy there between those two elements, the fast firing cricket with the additional crit, and the even more spammable fireball spell, because the faster you're killing with the cricket, the more fireballs you get, the more damage you do with the fireball, the more you cast fireball, the more often you get the crit boost. You can see how those two elements feed into each other to just boost your overall DPS. So anyway, long story short, Cascade, very good for this build. You see me here destroying the Calamity last second, and the mini boss spawns in just long enough to hit me in the face once. I panic summon the Rotten Fiend, and then the mini boss disappears. I do get some vulture ammo for my troubles, which is wonderful, and then we start checking out the map again to see where we go next. Um, I consider this cursed chest. I decide to go for it, and I get one of those groups of enemies wherein only one target is killable at a time. So you see all of those enemies shrouded in a sort of red mist. They cannot take any damage. So what you got to do is you got to circle around, find the one enemy who isn't shrouded in red mist in that red bubble, kill him first. Then another target will become vulnerable or open, and you just keep going like that until you go through the whole group. Um, don't know if this is how it's always supposed to be or if I just got unlucky, but the targets, the order in which the targets became vulnerable were basically heavy to light. So I get the handgunner first. You see me punching him here a couple of times because, as far as I can tell, there's two different stun or stagger states. I don't know exactly what they're called officially. The game doesn't make that very clear, but what I have noticed is that in one of those stagger states, your melee damage does bonus is increased. Basically, you do bonus melee damage in one of those stagger states. Anyway, I get rid of the grenadier as well. I pop out my own grenadier, and I start looking for the next vulnerable husk. There he is. I think I wasted some vulture ammo in the process because the main strength of the vulture is the ability of the projectile to bounce from target to target, which was completely wasted on this group as only one target was vulnerable at a time, but oh well, live and learn. Yep. Overall, it's not a bad fight. I know some people don't like this sort of event or the sort of hard rules that this game imposes on you, but I've been playing shooters my whole life, first-person shooters, and to be quite frank with you, I'm very glad to see how the genre is evolving in new directions with games like Doom Eternal, and like even the boomer shooters nowadays, they're starting to add elements of their own with time bending, additional mobility mechanics, and so on. And I think Witchfire is a very unique entry in this genre of evolved FPS games, let's say. So here you see me fighting another group of those assassins, which I think are some of my favorite light enemies. Like I mentioned before, I really love that flashbang pyramid, the way it's animated, the way you can deal with it, and so on. And something else that I gotta mention is pretty much every enemy in this game leads their shots, but they do it in a way that still gives you an opening to avoid the damage. So take the archers for example. If you're just running towards them and then sort of circle strafing around them, they will lead their shot at the very last moment, and that just feels to me a sort of realistic human-like behavior, let's say. It just feels better to fight against that. I don't know if you ever tried Doom 2016, not Doom Eternal, but its prequel. In that game, as long as you kept moving, like moving as in not double jumping, not dashing, which wasn't even the game at the time, but simply moving in one direction, holding down left, let's say, and just sort of circle strafing a whole room, almost nothing could touch you. There was a very low chance of you being touched by any projectile. And that just feels, pretty brain dead at that point. That once you figured that out, the game basically disappears. Not so with Witchfire. There's multiple. I feel like they put a lot of thought into not just the AI, but the tool set that the enemies have at their disposal, and more specifically, the types of projectiles the types of attacks and the types of telegraphs that you can respond to. So take the archers for example. Like I was saying, they do lead their shots if all you're doing is holding down the move keys and sort of trying to circle strafe around them. They will at the last moment lead their shots. And so you'll end up running right into the arrow. However, if you dash right before they let go of the arrow, you're going to dodge it. If you move in a sort of an unpredictable pattern, I find that also helps. So if instead of just constantly circle strafing right around them as you're approaching them, if you try to mix up your directions, if you put in a jump here and there, if you do a little crouch slide, even if you just switch up left and right a little bit, you'll have a far better chance of dodging their arrows. So this, while it seems like a small thing, I feel like getting this right in an FPS is so critical. Anyway, back to the current gameplay here. You see me sort of deciding to not chase after the Calamity Tornado or Calamity Hex Catalyst, whatever the game calls it, because it's frankly too far across the map. I have tons of vulture ammo, and all I gotta do is kill 10 wretches, which I decide to have a fair shot at. Wretches are actually surprisingly very tanky. They start off sort of small looking. They look like a light enemy, like one of the basic husks. But the more you shoot them, the more they sort of get engorged with this ice around them, and they just grow, and they actually can be pretty bullet spongy. Like, look, I fired 2 vulture projectiles into this one guy, and he's still standing. They must have something like 500 HP. Speaking of projectiles, again, the projectiles they fire have a sort of a semi-tracking capability. They home in on you, so if you dodge early, and I think that's one of the things that in general the games try to punish you is early dodging, particularly since you have stamina, right? So same with the wretch projectiles, the real ice homing missile. You don't want to dodge too early. You don't want to try to outrun it with your regular run speed. Perhaps sprinting could help, I'm not sure. But what you want to do is you want to let them get a little bit close and just at the last moment dodge them with a dash. And here you can see what the vulture can actually do in a large group of enemies. I love it. It's just beautiful. I love that you have, it's sort of like this game's, the demonic weapons are this game's version of the BFG, I guess, the big fucking gun from the Doom series. And I'm quite excited to see what else they're going to do, what other BFGs, what other demonic weapons there will be available in the future. You see me here waiting out this fire because, quite frankly, this game has a little problem with its clusterfuck of particle effects at times. You don't know what is your projectile, what is friendly fire, or literally what is not. So I decided, it was better to wait it out. Not sure if you noticed, but the last Arcana we picked up was Rekindled, which is really good. I believe it refreshes our files. It helps refresh our fire spells. Again, making our fireballs even more spammable. I forget what the condition is. I think it's on kill. So yeah, here you see me checking the map to see what's left on it. This is still that second run that we restarted after the crash. I've just been cutting out the travel time as much as possible. I believe we have one last camp of extremely dangerous enemies, and then after that we're going to try to challenge the area boss. You see me here using the double jump to try to make a beeline for the group rather than walking around the mountains. Your double jump can get you surprisingly high places, and a lot of these cliffs and mountains can actually be scaled if you just pay close attention to which surfaces you can land on. So we're getting very close to the group. Looking at the mini-map, I see a couple of blips ahead of me. Turns out to be some light enemies. And as I drop down, narrowly avoiding those 2 arrows, I see these heavy enemies I don't remember the name of, but I do know they're a bit of a pain in the ass to deal with. Typically, if I would have like a Shadow Mist Ring, what I like to do is I like to dash right through them and pop out from behind, shoot them in the back. As it stands, I think what I was trying to do here is to try to bait out their attack, try to get him to fire his gun and then circle around him, because otherwise you cannot just, you see the game doesn't let you simply circle strafe around him. You know, all those things you learned from past shooters, they just don't work on these enemies, and I personally really respect that added layer of challenge, you know, forcing you to come up with creative tricks, solutions to these combat challenges. Yeah. So here, I finally dispatched the heavy enemy, and I move in towards the lights. I'm spamming my fireballs a little more, although still not as much as I could. I have 2 charges, and I'm doing nothing with them, just dancing around for no reason. Here's an enemy grenadier. Okay, I finally use my fireball, bit of cricket spray. I realize I'm not going to get him with the clip, so I just decide to finish it off with a fireball. So while it is cool to keep chaining your cricket damage with the dashes, I still think that the majority of the damage, the true potential, the true damage potential of this build or loadout is actually just with the fireball spell. Here we're gonna pick up the last of our Arcana, since we don't need to boost our lightning damage because we don't have any. We're just gonna build more damage, more flat damage for our non-critical hits. And since we're pretty strong, I have one last look at the map, see if there's any other points of interest, which there are. There are cursed chests and whatnot, but I decide I'm not going to bother with those, and just going to head over to the area boss, the first familiar, which at this point I've already defeated a few times, but I decided what better way to end a good run than with the boss kill. So here we are in the pit of the shield bearer, or about to jump into it. As I'm doing this, I'm just trying to have a quick overview of my strategy, and I'm reminded we're not going to do any damage to him with the cricket since we cannot chain kills on a single target. So I start unloading with the all-seeing eye, doing some good bit of initial damage, a bunch of criticals. And the plan is to later use the cricket on the Revenant Horde that he summons, only to recharge the Fireball spell. So basically kill a bunch of Revenants, fast charge the Fireballs, as he dashes in, unload 1 or 2 Fireballs on him, and rinse and repeat. That is the overall game plan, but as you'll see, my execution isn't entirely consistent. I get hit here, for example, for no particular reason other than getting distracted by the mob. But really, that group of revenants is a godsend, as I can keep chaining kills with the cricket and recharging my fireballs. Really, I could pretty much do whatever I want at this point. I'm just thinking of what's the most efficient way of doing things, and I think that's one good mindset to have in these shooters. To enhance your enjoyment of them is, even when you're doing well and you're technically not in that moment threatened, I still find it enjoyable to try to figure out what is the optimal way of doing things, because once you do that, you get in the habit of playing well regardless of the amount of pressure you're under. It just becomes a habit for its own sake. And I feel like that sort of mindset works well in both, just say, competitive FPS, PvP oriented ones like Quake Champions, for example, or in just, you know, single player experiences that focus on offering a meaningful challenge, like this one. At this point, he's more than halfway dead, and I'm just waiting for him to do this bullshit green dome attack, which I've struggled with in the past, and as far as I can tell, the lessons I've learned are do not get tagged by the edge of it. If you get tagged with the green dome, your only option is to step inside of it, because if you try to go outside, the damage or poison or decay that it applies to you seems to outlast your health pool, and even if you start popping healing salves, it seems like you cannot heal the tick. Although to be quite frank, I haven't tested this with the henbane, so maybe there is there is a way to counter that, but still you are being slowed, and it's you know, you what I like to do is I like to, as soon as I see him jumping in, he gets in this phase where he has his shield. As he jumps in, I, instead of just giving him one dash, I try to give him 2 or even 3 dashes away, just to create enough distance between me and him in case he starts spinning up the shield to summon the green dome. And at this point he's almost dead. You can see there's a minor glitch there with his soul orb being visible, even though I'm not really, well, I am in the 80th state now, but I find that sometimes that soul orb will pop up next to enemies long after you've done the dash, or even if you're not in the focus state, and you can't really target it. It's just a visual glitch. It lingers, let's say. We got the win. And yeah, that was just my first video on the game. I wanted to share, really, I just wanted to share my thoughts on the game overall, and I wanted to also speak more specifically about this particular loadout that I most recently discovered. I'm sure there's many other builds. I'd love for you guys to tell me, but hopefully you enjoyed the video and learned a couple of things about the game.